Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Now today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Amnesty International. This is an important book. It's a book which I think will be of great significance to a very wide range of people involved in seeing that fair trials take place both in this country and abroad. It's Amnesty International, so it's got an international title to it. So this is the manual itself. That's the front page. It's now in a second edition. You can see the Amnesty logo at the back, and then that is the back of the book. So you can see there's a little bit of comment as to what this is all about. Obviously amnesty.org is the website. Let me show you how the book is structured, because you've got obviously paragraph numbering, which is extremely helpful to find things on the side. You've got a lot of footnotes, and you've also got footnotes at the side as well, or side notes, which again is extremely helpful. There's no actual index as such. It ends on a most sobering note, death penalty cases. But obviously what we're looking at here is a much wider area of things. Let me show you the front. It's the front of the book there. Then you can see the main bit there, and we haven't got any particular names. It's dedicated to Christopher Keith Hall, this book, and then we go into the acknowledgement. It mentions Jill Hine, who conceived the concept there, and so do read the acknowledgements and then have a look at the contents itself. You can see the structure there. There is an introduction, again more contents. Again, more contents. You can see it's split into various sections. We go up to chapter 32 right at the end, armed conflict, and then you've got an introduction and a quote from Martin Luther King, just to start things off, which I'll say: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And then it starts off, and then the book runs through with the introduction. As I say, you've got the side bit, you've got a little bit to write notes in if you need, and then you've got a whole range of little subheadings running through. Then of course you've got pre-trial rights for section A in itself, just to start things off. I think that's probably about as much as I'm going to show you of the manual itself. It's a paperback, and it's not too heavy. I don't know how many pages, let me just check. The total number of pages, well, 250 odd pages, so it's not particularly heavy in any way, but the content is of course of a very high standard. I'd like to thank everybody involved in this, because it's an important area. It doesn't matter what your party political views are. The fact is, we all actually at the end of the day, as advisors, lawyers, want to see a fair trial. I mean, we've got Article 6 of the Human Rights Act here in the UK, but the basic principles in a civilised society are that you have proper trials that are conducted fairly and are seen to be actually conducted fairly. And I hope some politicians who might wish otherwise might bear that one in mind before they start off on adventures of their own. Now, the quote that I give for the heading, which my wife and I have produced, we've written this together, is we've said: a commitment to justice and respect for human rights. Amnesty International's Fair Trial Manual is now published in a second edition. It's this one here. And this is what we say: in the continuing and never-ending battle to establish and uphold the highest standards of justice internationally, Amnesty International unwaveringly maintains its reputation as a doughty warrior in the fight. The first edition of its Fair Trial I'll get it right in a minute. Fair Trial Manual, Amnesty's Fair Trial Manual, was published in 1998, and one hopes forlornly that the principles and standards it promulgates can be eventually adhered to worldwide, although lamentably that remains an elusive aim. What we're doing here is we're reviewing this new manual because it's recently been published in a second edition. And much, of course, has changed since 1998, and the manual therefore will contain much new material if people remember the previous edition. So as with the first edition, the aim of this recent publication is, in the words of the editors, quote, to provide a practical guide to the relevant human rights and standards for anyone involved in examining how well a criminal trial or a justice system meets international standards of fairness. Go on to say anyone here will undoubtedly include lawmakers, policymakers, judges and lawyers, either for the prosecution or the defence, or we might add journalists, academics, and indeed anyone involved in any system of criminal justice in any country worldwide. Because we're looking at a global concept here, and that's very much part of Amnesty's mission. But it's also more than that, because we are living in the global, not the global village as such, but we are obviously much more able to communicate and see what's going on in other places very quickly. It's not as though it takes a week to know what's just happened. We know instantly because of the internet and communications and everything else. So therefore we do live in a different world, and we really, what Amnesty are trying to do is to look at standards as to the way in which we behave, or don't, as the case may be. Now, although the manual pertains to all forms of detention and or trials, including civil ones, the main focus is going to be on the criminal justice process and criminal proceedings, and it includes interpretation of standards by the United Nations and regional bodies. That's for instance, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights, and other international criminal tribunals. Remember one thing, whatever your views on human rights, we've got a whole range of different conventions and structures, all of which can crystallize down to some very basic principles, which eventually we hope will be applicable to everybody across the planet. That's not happening at the moment, but that's effectively what the UN was trying to do and is still trying to do, and that's certainly what we've done within Europe itself with the European Court of Human Rights. Whatever the comments that are made and the failings that some perceive them to have, and so forth, we do have these safeguarding checks and mechanisms in place, and that's what they're there for. So the new edition includes the many additional standards that have been adopted since 1998, an interesting year because that's when the Human Rights Act here in the UK showed up effectively. I know it took a little while to implement, but that's when it first started. So you can see there's been a sort of review of that, if you like, since 1998. And there are other key interpretations and developments which of course have recently emerged. And the excellent introduction to the manual, which I showed you, summarises 10 such developments right at the beginning, of which one stands out to us, namely that the challenges to fair trial rights have arisen as a result of counter-terrorism laws and policies, particularly in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks in the United States of America. And especially interesting here is Chapter 10 on the right to humane detention conditions and freedom from ill treatment and torture, which includes mental torture as well as physical torture. Other developments of note is the prohibition of mandatory death sentences. Now, as you're aware, we stopped all of that in Britain, and I don't see any likelihood of that coming back, whatever the kick-up of fuss. Also, it's quite clear that applies, of course, across the European Union, because it's a prerequisite of membership. And I'm hoping one day perhaps the Americans might start listening to what we're doing and trying to show a precedent that you don't go around killing your fellow human beings judicially. But we've got a way to go with that, especially in the States. The research and editorial efforts involved in compiling and drafting this manual have been formidable and reveal the highest order of commitment on the part of its many contributors, whose work is credited in the acknowledgements, again, which is at the front. A lot of people have been involved in this. Besides dedicated individuals who are named, there are a number of law firms who have provided research material as well, and they include Clifford Chance, Deshert, Herbert Smith, Linklaters, Reed Smith, and students of the BPP Law School in London. So there's been a really wide selection here of people having input. Let me conclude by saying that It's practical, authoritative, accurate and inspirational. Very much what Amnesty want. Amnesty's fair trial manual therefore should be considered an essential reference for any individual or institution concerned with human rights anywhere in the world. There is a website, of course, to note, which is amnesty.org. I'm just going to show the book again to you, just to remind you. It's a paperback, fairly light, that's the back. It's running to about 250 pages. I mentioned a few things. There is the introduction again. Let's go to the middle of the book. You can see interrogation rules and practices. Here we go. Trying to set some standards about what you should and shouldn't do. Right to remain silent. Mr. Blair might like to read that one, perhaps after what he did. And various other things. Again, right to be present at trial and appeal. It's a very important book. There have been attempts by certain politicians, and they're not just confined to one political party, even in this country, to look at this sort of thing and in fact deny people the right to a fair trial. And it's only courageous advocates, people like me, in court, trying to stop some of the abuses and standing up when it's quite clear that something wrong, seriously wrong sometimes, has gone on, that we will ever achieve the sort of peaceful change that we want. It's not for us to tell the Americans what to do with their death penalty. It's not for us to do a lot of other things, because there are democratic institutions. But it is for us to try to be pathfinders when we're looking to seek a fairness when the trial process takes place. That's what we've got here. Thank you, Amnesty, and thank you to all the people who work for them, who are involved with them, and for the support you give. It's very gratefully received, and that's why we've reviewed this work. Thank you. Bye-bye.